Welcome again, everyone. Welcome to today's Masters Technology Architect session, MEP-203, interacting with today's IT professional. As a reminder, the session will be recorded. Please use your question and answers buttons to speak with us about questions regarding this topic in particular. All right, we're going to introduce our instructors now. We are actually very, very proud to have a team from both the US and Germany on with us, along with our support team of Sherry and Carl. So glad to have them here as well. They, Mark, if you'd be so kind.
Yeah, the delay. Love it.
Right. And again, MEP 203, interacting with today's IT professionals. Your instructors are Mark Harrison, our Regional Technical Director out of TOLA. For those of you wondering what TOLA is, that stands for Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas. So he's in the center-south region of the United States. We have with us Rainer Buehler. He is our Advanced Technical Support Group engineer based out of Germany. And we're glad to have him with us as well. I, of course, am Richard Sasson, Global Director of Technical Services, and have been your host for the Masters Technology event. And we are so glad to have you here. I'm now going to turn it over to Mark to tell us about how we can work with today's IT professionals. What are their concerns? What are a lot of the things that are going to come up in conversations between you, the design community, the integration community, and your customer's IT team? And there's a lot of conversations we're going to have, and we're going to show you a lot of great information along with a little bit of a live demo of some tools you may not be aware of. Mark, if you'd be so kind, my good sir, please take it away.
Thank you, Rich. I appreciate that. I want to thank everyone for making it here from all over the world. Some of you are up late at night, others are early in the morning. And, you know, when this event was first scheduled and we were all ready to go to Orlando and give these presentations, and obviously we dealt with what we had to deal with. Just hats off to the entire Crestron team for pulling this off and turning it digital. I don't want to say overnight, but pretty close to just overnight. So thanks everyone for your flexibility and allowing us to do that. So let's talk about what today's course is going to cover. What we want to cover in interacting with the IT professional is what their roles and responsibilities are. Just kind of understanding what their position is so that we can be better partners for them. What their security concerns are, what their security concerns are around audio video products. And then we want to get into the product specifics and how to address those as we are being asked questions and helping them feel more comfortable deploying audio video products or UC products on their network. So the roles and responsibilities of the IT professional can be broken down into about 6 different areas. So there's functions, responsibilities, network contingencies. The part that really affects us the most is going to be the telephony audio video section. But they also have application development and then technical support. So let's talk about the functions. Underneath the functions of the IT professional, it's really broken into 3 areas. They have their governance, which is how they're using their system, using the architecture, things of that nature. The infrastructure, which is an area that we are probably all most familiar with. The hardware components, the network circuitry, the topology of the system. And then the functionality of their function is just how they deploy these systems, how are they securing them, where are they storing data, and then the use of software and analytics and gathering information as well. So we then get into their responsibilities, which breaks down into a few different areas. The biggest one out of this list is really going to be data security. Sure, they're in charge, you know, installation and maintenance of computer network infrastructure and all the other things on this list, but data security is the one that is really the one that raises the red flags for them when it comes to audio video products. You know, their goal is to keep the enterprises out of the news. I had a CIO one time tell me that we could deploy anything that we wanted on his network as long as he never had to answer on the 10 o'clock news why his information was out there in the wild and because of one of our products. And so we want to talk about ways to help you feel more confident and them feel more confident that that is exactly what you're doing when deploying these systems. The network contingency side of it is maximizing the uptime, minimizing the downtime, however you would like to state it, creating system backups, and then being able to get these systems back up and running in a very quick manner so that if there is a problem and the system does go down, they can be back up and running immediately. Remembering that the network is really what keeps a lot of enterprises running. Imagine doing this today without us having internet or networks available to us to be able to do this. It would just be really, really difficult, if not impossible. The other part, another part of their responsibilities is the telephony and the audio video side, the communication systems, electronic mail, the meeting space technologies. We're moving more and more towards soft codecs. The communication systems is a really big one, whether that's their video or their voice over IP systems. They're making phone calls between themselves within the enterprise, or they're talking to customers or suppliers, trying to collect bills, as we all have to do from time to time. The communication system it's the lifeblood of every company. It's what keeps them going. It's what keeps them flowing, which is one of the reasons that when we as audio video or integrators go into these enterprises, they get real concerned with where are we putting these products? Are we going to put them on their network? Because the last thing they can afford to have happen is us take down one of their networks. And because that's the lifeblood of that company. Another area that really falls into their responsibility could be the company website. Could be software for managing inventory, to managing, in our case, we use Salesforce. So we have internal Salesforce people that manage that software and keep it running for us. Could be our SAP system. There's lots of different applications that fall onto the responsibility of the IT department. And then they also get stuck with how come my mouse isn't working? How do I install this new software? I've turned on my computer, but I'm not getting an image. So they get drug into the mundane stuff as well. But the day-to-day responsibilities of this particular department is vast. They have a lot on their plate. And so one of the reasons we want to cover this is just so that we as a group, as a community, really understand what they are responsible for and how we can better partner with them. Because we need their help in deploying these systems. We need to communicate with them in a way that they're used to communicating. We need to give them assurance that we're on their side and that we're going to be there for them, and let them know that we're here to not put more on their plate, but to work with them to make their life as easy as humanly possible as they continue to be given more and more responsibilities. And so that's really the bulk of their responsibilities. We covered that pretty quick, but mainly we've covered a lot of this stuff already. And I wanted to make sure that we had just a brief understanding of everything that's on their plate, because we are asking for help from them in order to deploy our systems and do the things that the C-level folks and the executive level folks are expecting for that enterprise. And so, Rich, you got something for us there?
Yeah, Mark, it's interesting that with security in mind, I wonder if our audience has a kind of concept of how many individual accounts had their personal information exposed in 2019 due to a network security breach. So let's throw out that poll. Let's see, where do you think the most amount of individual accounts had their personal information exposed in 2019, which is pretty good. So it's some really good, it's really good to understand the exposure that goes on. We'll let this run for about 1 minute, and then we'll wrap up our poll and share the results, which is an interesting conversation. It's a very interesting perspective, right? As to how many people have had their account information exposed. And it's actually not, a person could have multiple accounts exposed. Is that fair in that statement, Mark? It's not just that individual, but accounts.
Oh, yes.
And so
Absolutely.
Think about that. And it's pretty amazing as you think about it. And we're going to give this another 5 seconds and we'll wrap up our poll. I see lots of people are voting, which is wonderful. and we do appreciate the participation. All right, let's go ahead and wrap this up. This is how many accounts have been attacked by any situation, anywhere, any company, right? And our audience is of belief that it is 33% said 500 million. Mark, what's the actual number of accounts that have been exposed through any kind of network security breach anywhere in the world, whether it's Honeywell or et cetera?
Yeah, so in 2019 alone, it was over 10 billion. When I first read that number, it was just staggering to sit and think about that, how much information was just released out into the wild due to these. And so I was doing some more research on it, and really it boiled down to what I found was three areas. One was hackers, which are always going to be out there. But the shocking one to me was about 10% of those breaches were listed, they're listed on Wikipedia as poor security. And you'd be amazed at some of the companies that were listed there as just having their breaches for poor security. These are large companies. And so as we get into this next slide, this is a list of a lot of the companies that have been exposed. This is by no means all of them. The list was, gosh, it was 6-7 pages long, where it just went down the list of all the ones that have had security breaches. I think we all, at least in North America or United States, remember the Target breach years ago. And that doesn't seem like it, but that was in 2013. That was it was estimated at 40 to 70 million. I think since then it's been updated to 110 million exposures. And when that happened, it was on the national news here in the United States. I mean, it was a really big deal. And then we look at last year's numbers at over 10 billion. That is just a staggering number. And that is really what gets IT departments, that's why they're so jumpy about us putting stuff on their network, that is the last thing that they want to have to address or explain is how did it happen or why did it happen. And so understanding this and just that vast number of 10 billion hopefully gives us a little more patience when we're dealing with the IT departments and answering their questions. And so with that, I am going to take it from here, and we're going to turn this over to Rainer and let him go ahead and take it for the audio video concerns so he can start addressing those. And is this a good time for another poll, you think, Rich?
No, we're going to do that one a little later. I'm sorry. My apologies. Yes, we are. Wrong,
okay.
I'm on the wrong slide. My apologies. You're right. So one of the things we wanted to ask is, let's see what our audience is aware of. Which network is unsecured? SSH, SFTP, HTTPS, or Telnet? So it's an interesting thing. You know, it's interesting because, you know, Mark, you touched on IT professionals. It really is such a broad group of professionals that fall under that. You know, there's InfoSec, there's security teams, there is, you know, what people believe are IT professionals. It's very, very interesting to understand the breadth of what IT encompasses, you know, and it really is we could spend days on this conversation as to who handles what, when, where, and how. And so it really all depends on the roles of IT in each company. And InfoSec is a big one. IT professionals are a wide-ranging and encompassing group. The interesting thing about it all is we as AV professionals living in the IT world need to ensure that we are working correctly with these various departments and various IT professionals to ensure that we can work in their environment to their standards. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up our poll here. We've got about 73% of the audience has voted. And what we've got here, Mark, is 83% said Telnet.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, it is correct. Yeah, Telnet is definitely the one that's not secure. You know, it's funny, Rich, you were talking about just what all falls underneath the departments or falls underneath the responsibilities for the IT department. I've got a customer, we have an end user customer here in our area, and I was meeting with their group. There's a group about 5 or 6 of them, and they're like, oh, let's walk up here to our floor. And we go to the floor that they're on, And they had over 600 employees in the IT department because it was just basically the technology department. And anything dealing with technology fell into the IT department. And so, and I think we find that to your point, that varies from company to company as far as what they put into that department. But it just shows you how big, how much effort and how much energy these enterprises are putting into their technology and their IT technology. So I think with that, Rainer, I'd like to turn this over to Rainer and see if he can get into some audio video
Yes.
concerns for them. And with that, take it away, sir.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, I won't at the end 100% telnet if we ask it again. By the way, I will use my best English, so I hope I can cover it. But please do not hesitate to use our Q&A so we can answer it later on. So if we go to the next page, Mark, can you maybe? Okay, great.
You did it.
So if you talk with the IT guys and also, for example, with the Crestron programmer, or also if we put our devices in the IT world, there is some important vocabulary. So we start with a very, very easy one, DHCP. What's DHCP? DHCP is Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. I think everybody knows it. IP addresses are issued by a DHCP server. So you plug your device in and then you get an IP address. A special thing is DHCP with reservations. So your device gets a fixed IP address based on the MAC address. For example, if you have a printer and the printer gets always a dedicated IP address, so you know the printer is always on this fixed IP address in your DHCP environment, so you can, based on the MAC address, put it on this IP address. That's a little bit a special thing. Also, an advantage of DHCP is that you can manage your IP range. So if you want to reduce it or if you want to expand it, so you have possibilities. The opposite, static IP address. So if you manually assign your on your device IP address, you are for sure less manageable. But if you do not have a DHCP server, that's the only option to get your device up and running, so you have to use static IP address. Now it becomes a little bit complicated. Next word, TLS. TLS is Transport Layer Security. So TLS is an encryption protocol used to establish a secure communication between two parties. Most of you are using it if you connect with your web browser to web pages. Then behind you, you are using TLS. For your information, if you heard about different versions, there were version 1.0, 1.1. They are using an older algorithm and they are disabled in most common web browsers such as Chrome, Edge, Firefox, and so on. So what's between version 1.1 and 1.2? So 1.2 is using a newer algorithm. It's a substantial cleanup of the client and server ability to specify which hash and signature algorithm they will accept, tightened up many of the requirements, as well as removing the outdated cipher suites like ED, EA, and DES. So ultimately, it's not so important to know the exact difference. Just you have to know Crestron supported. As our products, they are built up from the ground with this network securities as a priority. So we do not add it, let's say, as a day 2 feature or later on. No, we have it from ground up. That's important to know. So if we are talking about TLS 1.2, what's happening if everybody is supporting 1.3, so it goes further? I can tell you, I do not know what they are doing in the web browser section if they support still 1.2. What I can tell you, 1.3, we are really working hard at the moment on it, that we implement it in all our products. So we want to be the first company to utilize it in our UC, in our audio, in our video, and also in our control products. In the Crestron world, TLS 1.2 is used if you connect via web browser to our Crestron devices. Also, I think that's maybe you are not so familiar. If you use a TSW panel, for example, and connect it to your Crestron processor, the SCIP port is also used TLS. The next one, SSH Secure Shell, it provides data in motion encryption through what is known as symmetric key encryption. So the encryption prevents forks from picking up your data as it's transferred between the endpoints. It's defined on port 22nd. This secure shell is now default on our TSW panel and also for sure on our control processor. So if you use our toolbox, if you connect via, for example, text console, via file manager system info, you are using secure shell on port 22nd. So it replaces the telnet port. Telnet port, yeah, most of you know it. It's only a plain connection to the device. So with SSH, you have an encrypted connection to our devices. Oh, next one, 802.1x. A little bit hard to explain. The purpose of 802.x is to accept or reject users who want access to a network. It's a port-based network access control. So the supplicant is the client. He sends his wishes to the authenticator and creates a tunnel to the authentication server. In most cases, it's a radio server. So the authenticator can be an Ethernet switch, or it can be a wireless access point. So 802.1x is not only wired, you can also use it for wireless communication. So this authenticator acts like a security guard. And if the supplicant is authorized and validated, he gives you access to the network. So 802.x is not only used for security reason because it's an encrypted, it's also very, very often used in mass deployment. So if you would, for example, our Crestron hardware in a correct VLAN, or give them access for a specific time or for specific rights. So it's hardware port independent. You plug it in wherever you want, and you are automatically in the correct network. So you are very flexible, and that's why we are talking about it. It's manageable from the IT department. So make it simple. If a finance guy come in the office, connect his laptop on this port, he gets access to the finance network. If you plug on the same hardware port, a Crestron hardware, you get access to the AV network. That's 802.1x stands for. If a device does not support 802.x, you can use MEP, that's MAC authentication bypass. So the switch, our authenticator uses the MAC address of the device to assign it to the correct network. In general, Crestron supports two methods, also our TSW panel and our control system. It's MS-CHAP version 2, so you need a username and a password to authenticate on the Microsoft server, or we support EIP TLS, so you need a certificate to authorize a device. You can load this machine certificate via our toolbox system info, and then in SSL management, you see how you load the certificates in our devices. Active Directory. Active Directory is a centralized database, I would say, for username and password. So you can add a user that you want to give an access on your network, or you can manage user, or you can define a group of users. We in the Crestron world, we are using Active Directory to check the credentials. So next point, layer 2 versus layer 3 switch. Layer 2 switch is working on MAC address layer, and he is handling one single network. That's the big difference to layer 3 switch. Layer 2, one single network. If you have a layer 3 switch, the layer 3 switch is on the IP address layer, and he has the possibility static and dynamic routing. So a layer 3 switch can combine two networks on one single switch. That's the big difference. Yeah, a client network, I would say a client network, it's an enterprise network of a company. So larger companies have their own network. So if you come in this building as an end user, you do not get access to this network. A closed network, the name say closed. So it could be, for example, closed telephone network, in a private network without any external access, can be a closed network. Or it can represent a private network that can only be used by authorized devices. Can also be a closed network. A guest network is a separate network for guests to keep your, for example, client network safe. So it can be an isolated network with no interference to your network. Typically our media is installed in the guest network. Why? It's a presentation system also for end user if they come into it. So you can install it typically on the guest network. Okay. Go ahead. The next points also, now we go a little bit deeper in AV products. Also in the vocabulary, we are talking about multicast versus unicast. IGMP querying snooping, very short because it's handled tomorrow in the MTA section, Dante, and host clients and servers. So what's unicast? Unicast is a single connection. So it is one-to-one streaming. So the video can be requested by a single user and delivered to that endpoint directly. For a second endpoint to receive that stream, so it requires a second direct connection to the origination point and a second stream doubling the bandwidth requirements. So require larger processing power at the origination point if you want to support multiple destinations. So what happens? This growth in processing costs and bandwidth quickly eliminates unicast as a viable solution when distribute video to multiple endpoints. For example, Netflix, Hulu, and YouTube are using unicast. I think everybody knows it. If you have lots of people, they want to look at the same stream, you have issues on the bandwidth because bandwidth is limited, and also you have issues on the original source. So it's a limitation, and it depends on the destination it's used. So it's the opposite of multicast. Multicast is from one to many. So you have one single video stream and you transmit it to, for example, 1 million streams. So your source stays untouched. The switch only copy your stream. So the management is done by your Ethernet switch. So for sure, if you want to handle multicast streams, you need a switch that has this feature built in. So the key advantage is that the bandwidth stays uniform if you have one stream, two streams, or 1 million streams. So everybody is looking at the same stream and the stream is on the switch. So multicast allows for a viewing experience similar to watching TV in your home. Yeah, it's making an excellent user experience. I hope everybody knows it. Our NVX technology is using a multicast network infrastructure. If we are talking about NVX multicast network infrastructure, we have to use this both words, IGMP querying, snooping. Here's mentioned, it's the key to transport video over IP. So what's happening with IGMP snooping? IGMP snooping is for the management of the multicast data on a switch. So let's say if you enable IGMP snooping on your switch, so on startup, or your switch has closed every port for multicast data. So if the first device comes to your switch and requested this data, this multicast data, then the switch opened this port for multicast data. So you know, if you have not enabled IGMP snooping on your switch, or it's not configured, then the multicast data is broadcasted to all of your ports on your network switch. That's why IGMP snooping is the key of the success of multicast transmission. IGMP querier, I cannot explain it completely, otherwise it needs 1 hour. It has lots of different functions. One main function in my eyes is to keep the multicast stream alive. So normally every multicast stream has a timeout, and without querier, it can happen that after 3, 4, 5 minutes, your stream is gone. So that's IGMP query. It's also very important if you have multiple switches in your network. But be honest, if you are very interested in this, it's covered more tomorrow in the next MTA session, NVX. Dante Audio. Dante Audio, I do not want to go too deep in the technical specification because it makes no sense. In the protocol, there is in there, that's some timing information in there. It's a source and destination IP address in there. It's general audio over IP. Why we mentioned here 6 megabit per second. It has something to do with our NVX system. Everybody, I hope, knows it. We always talking about 1 gigabit infrastructure to transfer our videos. So in the reality, if you have a 4K stream, we only need, let's say, 750 megabit. So we have enough headroom, really enough headroom to transmit also Dante audio on the same network. So if you have an NVX 352, it has maximum 2 channel inputs, 2 channel outputs for your Dante stream. So you need 6 megabit per second. It's not a big deal, be honest. It's very, does not need lots of bandwidth. That's why it mentioned here. Normally it's UDP. Normally Dante is transferred as unicast, but multicast is also possible. So for example, if you have a stream from one Dante source and you want to make a flow to many Dante destinations, then it switches to multicast. It's automatically behind the scenes. Few words to NVX 350, 351 and AES 67 because we mentioned it on the ISE. So AES 67 is interoperable to Dante. So you can use, for example, your ordinate Dante controller to create routing points. So you can do routings with an ordinate Dante controller between our NVX and each Dante/AES 67 enabled device. So don't care about it, you can do it. The difference is AES 67 is in general multicast, but you, as I mentioned, what's important because everybody is asking, you do not see immediately if it's AES 67 or a Dante if you use, for example, ordinate Dante controller, so you can mix and match it. Okay.
Nice. So
before we jump on to the next comment here, real quick question was brought up. What about handling auto renewable certificates for 802.1x? Is that something we can handle, or is that a feature request? It's a question.
We can handle it, definitely.
Can you explain, can you elaborate a little bit on how that works?
Behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes, but we do support auto renewable.
There is a mechanism behind it. So I know that we used it, I know, in a big car manufacturer for sure in Germany. So I am 100% sure behind the scene there is a mechanism in there and pick up the new certificate. So that's possible, definitely possible.
Great, thank you. All right, continuing on.
Okay.
Mark, so I believe this is you, correct?
I think so, yeah.
No, that's also my...
Oh, it's still you? Okay, Rainer, please. Sorry.
Good.
So if I can go ahead. So I talk a little bit unknown hardware. Yeah, for me, it's very important. You must do everything that our hardware is not an unknown hardware in the network. So please talk with the IT folks, check what they need, which ports they need, which security level, talk with them. Because what's an unknown hardware? Normally an unknown hardware is, for the IT guys, just a not certified device. So it's not that we cannot solve it. So please do all that this unit gets certified. So maybe they have only one question, maybe they have 30 questions. It depends also on their environment, where they want to implement it. So please talk with them, ask what they need, that the unit is not an unknown hardware. also if you have bigger companies, they have certified hardware on their list. Maybe we can choose this one. So it's easier to pick a certified hardware from us before we go to the complete certification process. So yeah,
Well, and
please talk with them. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've even seen, Rainer, on the certified devices, not just enterprises, but also governments, where we have to have certain devices certified to go on their networks, which plays into our JITC certification, FIPS 140, things of that nature. But yeah, to your point, it's unknown hardware until it's known, right? Everything is.
Yeah, and that's what you also talk with them. Maybe we have it. Maybe we can directly use it. So it's you have to talk with them in the design phase. That's very important.
Yeah,
but
and we have a site. Not to interrupt, I apologize, but secure the secure.crestron.com is a great resource to find out all the information about the security on these devices, because to your point, we probably have those certifications and things to make them feel more comfortable. It's just a matter of exposing them to it and letting them know that it's there.
Absolutely. So come to the next point, bandwidth requirements. Yeah, makes a big difference. Makes a big difference if you install a streaming device or a control processor or a CEN IO device. I think that's normal. So Ben, talk with them what hardware we are using, and then we see which bandwidth we need. Bandwidth is very important if you go over different networks. Then bandwidth can getting more and more critical if you go from for example, data center over different routers. So talk with them. So if a video stream stays in a network, in one network, it's a complete different story than transfer it over different networks. So, but we will cover it also a little bit later, but think about it. Who will support the device? I think that's question number one. I cannot answer it. But maybe the IT team do the first line support. And if it's going more in deeper things, the AV dealer is doing that, or the CSP is doing that. But also always keep in mind, we have XIO Cloud. So with XIO Cloud, also the end user, the dealer, the IT guys, they have a great opportunity to manage and support these devices. So think also about this if we are talking who will support the device. Remote management. I talked about XIO Cloud. It was also covered yesterday in the session. So for sure, with XIO Cloud, you can support the device, but and do the remote management. But I also think about, for example, BACnet. Our every control system can host BACnet devices. Sometimes it's interesting if we talk about this and they say, oh, great opportunity to connect to them, so we can support BACnet or SNMP. Every control processor you can enable SNMP, and there it's tons of software tools around SNMP available. So talk with them. Maybe we can use this for remote management. Number of ports needed. Also, yeah, this concerns them from the physical space and cost. Additional ports on the enterprise network need to be accounted for them, and there is a cost associated with each one. So what can we do to minimize this? Think about DMPS or CP3N. We have a control subnet there. If you put all the Crestron devices on the control subnet, you can minimize it. And if you have a mass deployment, ports it's a cost factor. So think about it. Sometimes it's very easy to reduce it. Internet access. It depends on the application they run. I would say yes, no, I do not. It's a project decision. Also depends on which hardware we are using or install in the network. Explain why in some cases it makes sense to get internet access. With XIO Cloud, we can manage our devices. Or if you want to do remote management, so you can minimize interruptions, then for sure you need internet access. Separate network, yeah, you can, it's not so easy. What's separate network? You can describe different things with this. Separate network could be a complete isolated network with no physical connection to each other. or a separate network on a logical layer with two different VLANs. If you have an isolated network, it's very easy to build up, but to maintain for the IT department, it is, in my opinion, definitely not helpful. So if you have a separate network with no communication to other networks, in my opinion, it's an old way of thinking, because you are losing a lot of benefits. Think on monitoring, think on managing devices. So keep this in mind. Guest network, is it best practice if you put a device in a guest network? If I think, for example, AirMedia is a presentation system. So in my eyes, it fits perfect in a guest network. All silent?
Okay.
All right.
I think we're going over to Mark at this point. Actually, I
Yes.
wanted to, before we jump into something, because I think we're going to come back to you, Rainer, in a second. You know, it's interesting. There's some interesting conversations going on in the question and answers.
Good.
But I have a funny feeling our customers are not aware of something. And I actually wanted to ask Rainer, I'm going to ask the audience, have they heard of Crestron's security audit tool? And you know, it's have they seen it? Have they heard it? Have they used it? Because I think it's a very powerful tool, and I think if you don't mind, I think this is a great opportunity to show the Crestron security audit tool to help our customers understand what it does, how it could be used, and do you think you could do that for us today? Rainer, are you there?
Rainer?
He looks frozen.
Yes.
Ah, good.
Oh, sorry.
Getting scared.
It was
I
a
hope I'm
statue.
still there.
Yes, we're still here. Good. Okay. So Rainer, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll in about 10 seconds. And then what I'd like to be able to do is, could you show our customers the Crestron security audit tool before we jump into a more detailed conversation?
Sure. If I.
Great. You want to take control and share your screen?
Yes, I absolutely. I hope you see
There we
now
go.
my. Do you see my screen?
Yes, we do. Just real quick, here's the good news, Rainer. I'm very excited to see this. 60% of our audience has seen, heard, or used the security audit tool. That's very, very good news. I think that's wonderful, because we were discussing this earlier, and I didn't think we'd get that high a level of adoption. Hopefully after this, that number gets to move up to 100% moving forward. So tell us about this great tool, what it does, when it can be used. I think it really is a very, very powerful tool that people should use more often.
Absolutely, and if I want to talk about it, because it's sometimes you need a little bit training or something like this, and this is really such an easy tool to use. So I hope you'll see my screen. Under tools, there's directly here you see security audit tool. So immediately you can only press the button and it's up and running. So what you have to do, press the button at the devices. So I select from the address book my device for sure, but you can select all of the devices you have on your network, in your system, and something like this. Then you have to select your security level. So we have level 1, 2, 3, 4. So level 1 is more the basic one, and then advanced one. So it depends on the hardware you are installing in which area. So you can choose whatever you want, depends on what you need in this installation. If you are not sure what is behind these levels, you have a few options. So we are very, very open. We show you on every hardware what exactly in which level we are testing. So you can immediately look, oh, that's matches for me. Oh no, that's not fine for me. So it's really open that what's going on behind the scene for each hardware device. So you only have to select your device, select the level, and push the run button, and then you have to wait. And why I show it, it's so easy to use it. So you have only wait to the results, and then for sure past is always good. But if you have a failed button and you are not 100% sure what audit log is, you only press the button to resolve it, and it directly open you the correct window. So you only have to press, you see audit log failed, so you enable it. So that's all. For example, if I run it now again, you see it passed. So it's really, really easy to use. And if you have lots of hardware units, then you can resolve it on lots of the devices. And it needs, I would say, only, yeah, 3-4 minutes to completely resolve it. If you have a unit which is, I would say, very, very, yeah, not safe, not secure, you do not take care of this. It's out of the box. It's not true, because Mark is telling this later. We have now authentication on by default on the latest firmware, but it's very easy to check your hardware and get the issues fixed with, not with, you do not need background for a console, for command line, for the complete stuff. You do not have documentation. Use this tool, press the button, enable it, run it again, and it's done. It's really, really easy to use, I would say.
Yeah, it's very, very simple to use. I love the buttons that you just, okay, this one failed, you click the button and you can, brings up the window to go in and go ahead and make those changes for it. So it's a really neat tool. It's been out for a couple of years now. And
absolutely, I think 2, 3, 4 years now.
Yeah, but it's amazing how many people still are unaware of it. Even within Crestron, we have folks that are unaware of it. So it's a fantastic tool and really needed in today's environment with all of the different challenges that we run into.
You know, it's interesting. One of the questions that came up while you were speaking is there a way to do a custom security audit level beyond the ones that are shown here, the target security levels?
Great question.
Also in the past, it was definitely possible. I have to check it, sorry.
We had a way to create custom security levels. Can we double check that? We'll confirm that back to and get that back to the question that came in.
In the past, it was definitely possible. So yeah. I check it.
I'm sure it's still there. Yeah. But yeah, what a great tool. So, and I can see that tool growing in familiarity as well as in all aspects of stuff that it's doing, just with all the stuff we're dealing with today. So let's talk about the product specifics around wherever we're talking to different IT departments and what it is that that they're looking for. So we're going to talk about in this next section, we're going to talk about the product specifics around our processors, touch panels, obviously scheduling panels as well as part of touch panels, our UC devices, air medias and some best practices for those. We want to talk about HD-based T video versus NVX video, Dante embedded devices, and then we're going to wrap it up with Fusion and XIO Cloud, 2 software offerings, and some just brief conversations that we can have with IT departments, and then we'll get into some resources for all of us to have and use. So there are certainly resources I use almost every day as weekly, if not 3 or 4 times a week. I have conversations area, and it's not the same, but it is all the same. Really, the concern for all of them is security. You know, how by deploying this on the network, what am I really exposing myself to, and how do we give them that level of comfortability once again? So let's talk about our control processors. And I'm getting a gray message. My internet is unstable, so hopefully I'm not frozen. So let's talk about the control ports, the standard CIP ports that we have used for as long as we've had Ethernet processors out, which was the X-Gen, 41794 and 41795. If we enable TLS security, we're now able to do, we've switched ports and we're using ports 41796 and 41797. And then through SSH console port, we're using port 22. For control subnets, we have an answer ID of 4436 that we can get into the specifics on how each of those control subnets work. But without going too deep into the weeds on that, we want to talk about the control subnet and what that is. That is a secondary Ethernet port that's on several of our processors, from Pro 3s to the AV3s, the CP3Ns, and it allows us to create a separate VLAN, if you will, off of that processor. So the processor would have its main Ethernet port connected to the enterprise network, and then through the control subnet, we could have all of the audio video peripheral products on a separate network without the enterprise's IT department creating that VLAN for us. And then that's also available on the DMPS3s, the 350s, and the 250s. On those same DMPS3s, 350s, and 250s, we also have an air media port called a content LAN port. And that allows us to have that air media on the guest network if you want it there. Or we've got some slides where we're going to get in more detail on a good deployment for air media. So there may be an air media VLAN as well that could be created. And that would actually give you three network connections there on those DMPS units. I want to talk about authentication. So authentication is now enabled out of the box on all 4 series processors, which the MC4s are shipping now. So you should see CP4s out here, fairly quickly, the next 60, 90 days, I would imagine we'll see those. But with authentication automatically on, we can no longer just launch the web browser and log in admin. In fact, it forces you, when you first plug it in, the first thing you see is create your user account. And if you type in admin, which I did to try to just make it go by quickly, it fails on you. So you actually have to put in a proper authentication. And with firmware moving forward on the 3 series and on the TSW panels, you will see that same behavior where we are forcing authentication right out of the box. I would imagine, or I would be surprised, and this is Mark talking, not Crestron talking, I would be surprised if you didn't see that moving forward on the majority, if not all of our products, just as the environment continues to change, right? And then last is, do we need internet access on these devices? So we've got these ports that we need to be able to communicate on. We may have some other network stuff that we need to do with between the control subnets and the content LAN, but then do we need internet access? And we do for XIO Cloud to work. We'll talk a little bit more about XIO Cloud, although that was covered in a previous session in XIO Cloud versus Fusion. And then do we need remote access to these units? So if we need remote access to these units for various things, maybe we have applications that are running, maybe we're scraping websites for information, maybe we're communicating from one processor to another across multiple cities. There could be a lot of different reasons for that, but if you do have those needs, then yes, you will need internet access at the control processors or anything else that you want that to touch. So that's the bulk of it with our control processors. Then we get into our touch panels or touch screens, and this is going to be the same whether it's a scheduling touch panel or whether it's a TSW touch panel being used for a custom project or .AV framework. The CIP ports are the same. The secure TLS ports are still 41796 and 41797. The upload ports and this is the same for the control processors as well. 41795 if it's insecure, or in a secure environment, 41797. And then internet access for our touch panels is the same. It's remote management. And then XIO Cloud. Do we need these touch panels to be able to go and reach things that are outside in the real world, in the wild, if you will, on the internet? And then scheduling information. We'll talk more about scheduling information, but the scheduling information, a lot of times it was going to be cloud hosted. Sometimes it is, or sometimes it's not, but for the bulk of it, it's going to be cloud hosted. And moving forward, I think we'll see that pretty quickly in pretty short order, almost all of it will be out in the cloud. And then the last consideration we need to think about when it comes to our touch panels and living on the network is, are we using the camera that's built into it? And if we are, we need to make sure that we are prepared to handle the bandwidth, which is small, for H.264 video. So on the scheduling panels, we have several different things to take into. So we have the Crestron default scheduling application, which is the standard look that we've seen for a long time. We've done some changes to it, but it's the red and the green look. You can have horizontal, vertical, but these applications on the left, or scheduling engines on the left, from Outlook, on-prem, to Office 365, Google, CollegeNet, 25 Live, Ad Astra, those all work in the default Crestron setting. So they will use the standard Crestron UI. And then we have many applications that run natively on the panel, and they do a direct connect to those scheduling engines. For instance, Zoom. There's no programming to get the Zoom to work. There's just a real quick configuration. Same for AppSpace, Robin Team, all of these listed, as well as about 10 to 15 more of them, and we are adding more constantly, where we are doing direct connections to these different scheduling applications. And that allows really the flexibility of our scheduling panels. There's about probably 10 different reasons that I talk about whenever I'm talking to folks about why to use a Crestron scheduling panel. But really it boils down to one, and that is it's a world-class enterprise network security grade appliance. It will give you the security that you need. There is not better security in any scheduling application or scheduling device that you use. The flexibility that it gives you, you are not locked into any scheduling software. You can make changes as you need to through XIO Cloud. It is just, it's amazing how flexible this product is, and really how it's evolved over the last 3 or 4 years in allowing enterprises to do things at their pace and the way that they want to. John Otteson said it a few years ago, we were decoupling our software from our hardware. And this is a prime example of that. All of these that we're listing right here, we could handle 5 years ago, maybe 3 of them, and they required a Fusion connection to go into. Today, all of these, plus all the ones I haven't mentioned, there's another, like I said, 10 or 12, will connect directly to the panel without Fusion. It's just a Crestron hardware piece connected to those other software providers, allowing scheduling to happen. So it's really a pretty neat evolution, if you will, of the product. And then we get into unified communications. So another big push for Crestron in the last couple of years has been unified communications. We've had UC products for years, but it is new to be as focused as it is with our Flex product line. And what we need for these Flex product lines to work is we need a UC engine. It needs internet access. We need to know what platform it's working on. Is it working on Teams? Is it working on Zoom? We need the control panel, the touch panel, to be able to connect to it. We have several different ways for that touch panel to connect to it. We have an Ethernet adapter, actually, that goes into USB to Ethernet, and I will get that posted in the post. Whenever we post this after the fact, I'll make sure that we have that part number for everyone to go to. That converts USB to Ethernet so that we can do a direct connection from the touch panel straight to the UC engine, while the UC engine lives on the network that can see Zoom Cloud or the Teams environment and be able to give that control. We also have the Mercury MX, which is native Teams or Zoom, but also allows you to bring your own device into the room, which is one of the real challenge that we've run into as enterprises move over to soft codecs. I think we've all seen in the last few months that the bulk of everyone is using one of 2 platforms, Zoom or Teams, but not everyone is. There's still folks out there using a lot of the other platforms, and they want to continue to use those. So how are we able to do that with our UC platform when it's a native Teams device? And that's where the Mercury MX comes in. So if you look at the model numbers, it's the X that really makes it the flexible unit where it can be a native Teams or Zoom device, but also a BYOD device. And you should expect to see the X products show up in our B series as well as the C series of the Flex line in the near future as we continue to move forward and evolve that product line. You know, the Flex product line is going to be a lot like the digital media product line. When we first launched it, there was 8 SKUs. And today you look at digital media and the SKUs just run off the page. There's so many of them. And you're going to see the same thing moving forward with the Flex line as that, like I said, as the UC continues to evolve within Crestron. So let's talk about the Air Media. And the Air Media, really it needs XIO Cloud internet access so that it can be managed remotely. At one point, it needed to be on the network where you could host a background image if you wanted to change it. With lately with firmware updates, we now have the ability to put the image directly on the Air Media. But for auto update, we do need to be on port 443. We need that to be open, which is a secure port. And then we have a couple of different ways that we can actually connect this device on the customer's network. One of the scariest parts of any presentation system in the corporate environment is, okay, it's a wireless presentation piece, but it lives on my network. How do my guests have access to this if they come in? Do I have to put them on my network? Because then you're exposing your network to any of your guests and what their security levels are. So one of the ways to overcome that, and Rainer alluded to this, is the Air Media, the AM200 or 300, can be installed directly on the guest network. And then when the guest comes in, they have access to that device and they can start presenting. One of the challenges in that particular rollout or that particular deployment is I work for the corporation and I have content on a server somewhere that I also want to share. So how do I get that from the guest network? Well, if the network's set up properly and securely, you don't. And so we run into that scenario. And so one of the other ways that we can hook this up, and this is actually right out of the deployment guide. This is an image straight from there. And I bring this one up and I've made it big because almost every time I have an Air Media discussion, this has to be talked about how to secure your Air Media so that my guest and my corporate customers have access to the Air Media from either network. And so what we have here is the guest VLAN. So I'm as a guest, I walk in, I connect to the VLAN, the guest VLAN. I can now have a two-way communication between the guest VLAN and my Air Media VLAN. So we're creating a third VLAN, an independent VLAN that just the Air Medias live on. Then I go to my corporate VLAN and I create a one-way tunnel from my corporate VLAN to the Air Media VLAN, but do not allow the information to come back. So nothing from my Air Media VLAN can go back into my corporate VLAN. And we can do that through the switch configurations and the network tools. That gives me my Air Media on this bubble or on this island, if you will, so that no matter who I am in the room trying to access the Air Media for wireless presentation, I now have access to it without exposing my network to any of my guests that come in or any of my data to any of the maybe potentially viruses that my guests have brought in on their laptops because they're not as diligent with security as what we would like for them to be. So this is a nice way to secure that and give you that protection. There have been questions people have asked, well, why can't we do that by just adding another Ethernet port on the Air Media and let it plug into both? And one of the things that we have lived by for years at Crestron is this Air Media device doesn't really matter what any of our devices cost. They don't cost anything compared to a very nice firewall that actually protects you. And protecting at the appliance level is vital. You know, we go back to the slide earlier where we looked at all those breaches, and most, I won't say most, that's not true, a vast amount of those breaches happened at the appliance level, where folks were able to get into devices that then exposed the rest of the network whether it was a thermostat that's on the network or any number of other items. If you don't handle security at the appliance level, then you're really leaving yourself open. And so this particular configuration with a single Ethernet port on the air media really keeps that security in control of the enterprise and the IT department, and lets them handle it and take care of it all. So another product, that the next one we want to talk about, is digital media. Obviously, the control ports are going to be the same as what we've listed for the touch panels, as what we've listed for the processors. Upload ports are going to be the same. Does it need internet access? It might, typically not, but it could. If you want to manage it with XIO Cloud, then yes, you definitely need internet access. If you want to be able to pull any of the analytics that XIO Cloud allows you to get out of a digital media HD-based switch, then you definitely need internet access. One of the other things that the digital media chassis will do for you, and the DMPS units will do for you, is create a private network mode. This private network mode allows us, let me back up just one second, all of the digital media products that are connected to the chassis will have what we call a DM connection. Part of that DM connection is the Ethernet channel. So we're passing Ethernet to our room control boxes or our receivers, as well as to our transmitters. And so in passing Ethernet to those and controlling those via Ethernet, they need an IP address. So we could plug a DM chassis into a network without private network mode and allow it to grab DHCP via DHCP, let it grab a bunch of different IP addresses, and these devices would then get their IP addresses. But I can tell you, the first time that we deployed a DM system and did that, it was in a very secure environment, and the DM chassis grabbed 17 IP addresses, and whistles and bells and red lights went off everywhere, where that was not something they liked. So private network mode gives us the ability for that DM chassis to take a single IP address so that we have control of the DM chassis, and it creates a VLAN using 169.254 IP addresses, and then we can assign a system ID to it that gives us the third octet, so that now we have multiple chassis on one network without them colliding or creating a IP address conflict. And so that's the HD-based T. So DM NVX is another product, and I left the DM logo on here for a reason, because I get into a lot of conversations where folks say, oh, well, it's not DM, it's NVX. And let's get rid of that myth right now. NVX is DM. HD-based TDM and video over IP DM are different, but everything up to the point where we create how that video is transported over the Cat5 is the same. It's digital media. It's one of the reasons that NVX has been such a successful product for us, is that it's built on 10 years of experience of creating digital media. The things we need to be aware of whenever we are creating or putting NVX, deploying NVX on the network, is how many endpoints do we have? So each one of those is going to need an IP address. Do we need internet access for these endpoints? We may, if we're trying to manage them via XIO Cloud. The control ports and upload ports, once again, those are going to be the same as what we've already discussed with the control processors and the TSW panels and the DM chassis. So then we get to bandwidth. Bandwidth becomes a real concern here. And what a lot of folks, and I don't get this question as much today as I did 2 years ago, but I still get it a lot. Well, I'm going to have a 48 port network switch, and I need 8 encoders. And so therefore I need a 10 gig switch, so that I can have all those encoders on that same switch going to 20 different displays. And to go back to an area that Rainer covered, that's just not the case. With IGMP and querying deployed properly, you need
do you talk about 10 gig or what? Sorry, Mark.
So Well, that's what I'm saying is people will ask of, do we need a 10 gig switch
No.
for 8? Exactly.
No.
No, we simply just need a 1 gig switch.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, because IGMP is going to handle that. That is your
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's the traffic cop, right? It's
Yeah.
the one that says, oh, do you need to go this way? Okay, you go that way, and you go this way, and it keeps the video only going where it's being asked for. And then the querying is what says, oh, you still need this video, so it keeps it open. So between your IGMP and your querying, that's what's going to keep your bandwidth down to allow NVX to work on a 1 gig network switch. One of the things that I've seen lately is, we have a variable bandwidth. And that is awesome. That is really cool that they have a variable bandwidth. That really helps them with sales. But let's call it what it is. If I design my network switch for the lowest common denominator because of this variable bandwidth, then whenever it's not at its lowest common denominator, you're still going to have a choke point, and you're going to have video flickers and video drops. It gains you nothing. We're in a 1 gig switch. We are using 750 meg. We still have headroom, and we're not pushing anything else on the port anyway. So the variable bandwidth is not going to help us. By keeping it consistent, by keeping it solid, we can keep everything running consistently the exact same way. So NVX has an adjustable bandwidth where we can adjust it from 200 meg all the way up to 900 meg. What I have experienced, and I think Rainer alluded to it as well, is 750 seems to be the sweet spot for 4K 60 444. And we're able to push that all day long. If we apply the 80% rule that electricians use here in the US, which is 80% of capacity is full, we're at 75% of capacity at 750 meg, and we've still got plenty of headroom for any burst or anything else that might that might surprise us as it pops up. So the bandwidth is always a concern that I have to talk about with video over IP. As we get into switch to switch conversations, right? So I have floor 1 has a network switch with 4 encoders, and floor 2 has a network switch with 4 encoders, and I want to be able to send the 4 encoders from each floor back and forth to each other. I need to make sure that my uplink ports between them will handle 4 gig, because I may need all 4 of the encoders from one floor to be visible on decoders on the other floor. So I need to make sure that I can pass my 4 gigs, all 4 video signals over to that other floor. One thing to keep in mind is that uplink, or that fiber connection between the switches, is 2-way. So even though I've got 4 gig on floor 1 and 4 gig on floor 2, I do not need 8 gig between, because I've got 4 gig each way. So you only need up to 4 gig at that point. Next, DM NVX Director. So NVX Director is a management tool, allows us to deploy the NVX products. Does it need internet access? It will for XIO Cloud if you're using that. The control ports and upload ports, once again, are the same. The bandwidth for NVX Director is very low, as it's a control device. There are 3 different sizes of directors that are out there today. There's the 80, the 160, and the enterprise level. The 80 will support up to 80 endpoints, whether they are encoders or decoders, doesn't matter. It's just the total count of endpoints. The 160 will do 160 endpoints, and the enterprise level will get you way above that. I'm not sure where the limit is on that, but if you want to test it and you have a project for it, we'd love to talk to you about it and figure out where those limits are. That would be a lot of fun. The differences between those is not only how many endpoints that they'll handle, but also the number of Ethernet ports that are on them. So security would be handled at each port, so that we could set up securities, network securities and IDs and authentication and all that at each port level on the director, and allowing us to connect to multiple subnets at that point for control. So then we get into our Dante products. All right, so with Dante, there's just a couple of things we really need to know. As far as considerations go, the bandwidth is 6 megabits per second. It's a blip on the radar on a 1 gig switch. You just really, there's not a whole lot to think about with, I'm putting Dante on here, am I going to flood my network? You're not. The ports used for ATP is 4321, AES 67 uses 5004, and then multicast and unicast DDM will use 319 and ports 320. So you just want to make sure that those are open and available to you, and you'll be good with any Dante products being on that network. Next, we're going to get into the Crestron Fusion platform. So Crestron Fusion platform has been around for a number of years now. It started out as RoomView, and it's been deployed successfully hundreds of times, if not thousands of times, probably thousands of times actually. We have a dedicated team here at Crestron that supports Fusion and Fusion deployments. It's more of our, I call it the analytics tool. It is a wonderful platform for gathering and looking at reports and analytics on how your rooms are being used, etc. And all that's great. But let's talk about what we need in order to deploy this. So there's it runs on several different operating systems. So all Windows Server, 2008 R2, 2012 or 2012 R2, as well as 2016. It does require SQL to be installed. And then we also want to talk about a little bit, at least, this RoomView bandwidth calculator. So while Fusion doesn't necessarily take a lot of bandwidth on the network, the number of rooms you're deploying with it will or can. You know, we've got some Fusion deployments out there that have thousands of rooms on them. And by the time you multiply a little bit of bandwidth times 1,000, you end up with 1,000 times a little bit, which equals a lot. And so you want to make sure that you have used this calculator if you're getting into a Fusion deployment, and just make sure that your network thresholds are doing good, and you're not exceeding any of the bandwidths that you're going to need. There are lots of tools out there for Fusion. We have a bunch of them. We will list a lot of those here at the end of the presentation so that you know where to go to get to those. I would also recommend, if you are getting into a Fusion deployment, and please engage us in that and let us help. It's not difficult to do Fusion, but it is specific. And so let's just engage us with it. We've got a ton of folks here at Crestron that know the platform and can help you and just overcome the I don't know what I don't know problems, because nobody knows what they don't know until they figure out, wow, I didn't know that. So let us help you with that. And we can make that process a lot easier by just being involved early in the process. And so XIO Cloud. So, you know, we talked a little bit about Fusion. There was a class a couple of days ago, or a session a couple of days ago, that talked about XIO Cloud and Fusion and what the differences are. I talked about Fusion being what I call my analytics engine. I want to know how things are being used, when they're being used, who's using them, things like that. XIO Cloud I call my management tool. It is a wonderful management tool. In fact, when it first came out, we all had these regional offices all over, not only North America, but all over the world at Crestron. And we all have a closet with equipment in it for demos or for setting equipment up and mocking things up. And I went and grabbed a bunch of our equipment and plugged it all in and started discovering it on XIO Cloud and realized, no one's plugged this in 8 months. Firmware's out of date. At the time, almost every device that we had in our region was out of date in firmware. Today, they're all up to date, because once a month I go in and update all of them for firmware, all the firmware on all the devices. It takes me about 18 minutes if I go through every single device. It's a wonderful tool for managing and maintaining these devices, also for deploying them. It does connect via port 443. It is a two-way connection. It asks for the status of the devices, so the devices are going out to the cloud and reporting their status. and then it pushes the settings from the cloud back down to the devices, as well as we can push firmware and project updates from the cloud down to the devices. It does use 2 different domains. It uses Crestron.io and Azure-devices.net in order to pull this off. So Microsoft Azure is what it is hosted on. And then we've got some additional resources here. One is the Crestron Masters website. That's the first one I want to talk about. And Rich spoke about this one as we first got started. Online Help Article 2015 is a resource that we have. This is where all of the presentations will be posted. I believe I saw in there the Q&As are being posted in there as well.
Eventually, yeah, the Q&A, the Q&As do get added later. We are sending them out in email responses to all of the attendees so they can review those. We had a request today to take a look at some of the chat stuff. It's a lot more complicated to do that because there's a lot of information going on there today. There's a whole bunch of conversations going on. Yeah. But that's something we can do. But the Online Help 2015 article has every video and PowerPoint presentation posted since we started the MTA. This year it is there, and previous years are also on Online Help as well. You can do a search for Masters. So that information is there. Excellent, excellent.
Another microsite is the Flex microsite. Tons of information there on all of our Flex product line. And then probably one that we didn't cover enough that we should really, I want everyone to really be aware of this, is security.crestron.com. This is where you will find white papers, you will find applications, you will find so much information on the security for all of our devices. Which devices are JITC certified? Which devices can do this? That is it's a new website that Mr. Pavlik and his team have assisted in or put together, and it's really good. That actually has gone live between when we were supposed to all be in Orlando and today, and so it's kind of nice that that's live for this presentation. It is a great website to go to. I have started using it since it came out, and I can tell you it has answered a lot of questions for me and prevented me from having to make phone calls to other folks. So it's out there for all of you to use. Please feel free to use it, and there's a ton of information on there, like I said. The other additional resources, and this top one's a really good one, this IP guidelines for the IT professional. This is a really good, it's not generic, but it's not really totally deep dive, but it's a great guide for just deploying Crestron products on the network and what the IT folks are really going to need to know. It goes into a lot of detail. This is a really good guide. You should definitely take some time to at least download it, keep it on your machine so you can take a look at it as you need to. Fusion Best Practices and Fusion Insider are 2 others, and those are both available in Online Help. There's an XIO Cloud Online Help as well that's available to give you a lot more information about that platform. Same for NVX. And then scheduling panels, there's a great resource for the scheduling panels. There's a Flex Online Help for how to deploy Flex systems. Ton of information there. The Air Media Security Reference Guide, you can find the drawings that I showed you earlier in there. There's also a lot of information about how to securely deploy an Air Media in a proper deployment. So these 8 guides, I use these a lot. We all use these a lot on a daily basis. And so I would recommend everyone at least take a picture of this screen or something so that you have it. If not, pull it down after we get this posted in Online Help 2015. And so now I want to talk about our next session. Rich, do you have some detail on this session?
Yep, I'm going to jump in here now. Mark and Rainer, thank you so much for your presentation. We are running actually right on time for once. It's exciting. So really appreciate that, gentlemen. Thank you. Very good. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. There are a couple of great questions I think we can answer before we wrap up. Tomorrow's session is MEP-203 NVX design proficiency. We are going to go deeper and deeper in depth on NVX without quite taking the NVXN or CNSD classes. We only have 90 minutes and not 8 hours, but we are going to talk quite a bit more about NVX and designing for NVX accordingly. So a lot of great information here today talking about security, a lot of great information talking about how to work with the IT professionals and to partner. A couple of questions I did want to answer. Yeah. So the Mark, if you could, the screenshot of your resources. By the way, the question is wanted a screenshot of the resources. Again, that's going to get posted on Online Help Answer ID 2015. Should be up by tomorrow morning, US time. You can download the PowerPoint presentation as a PDF and you'll be able to utilize that. Okay, but you're going to leave it up there, Mark, for them. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
There's a question here. Are there specific drawings of any projects for reference for connections of the devices? I'm presuming that's in relation to your Air Media presentation, which if you look at the Air Media Security Reference Guide that is posted here, or if you go to the AM200 product page and you go to resources and look for the Air Media Security Reference Guide, you will find that information there as well. So that's a great solution.
I think it's page 17 in that guide.
Is that what it is? Okay.
I've used it enough.
Correct. Now there's some questions about XIO Director that came up, and since we have a couple minutes, I do want to answer that before we wrap up. Let's go ahead and ask, can you pass control system signals from your control processor through Director to the endpoint serial ports? Why don't you explain to them what the intent of the XIO Director is in relation to control versus routing management, et cetera. I think let's back up and cover that again.
Yeah, so that's a good question, by the way, because that actually comes up quite a bit. So the Director is there for deploying and configuring, as well as communicating across multiple subnets for from a single control processor to the NVX endpoints. So since it is a Crestron product, it allows a single IP table entry. One of the things, for those of us that are programmers out there, you know, how many IP IDs can we have in a processor, for instance, right? We're going to run into not only how many IDs we can have when we start talking about a large NVX deployment, but also how many open connections can we have from that processor at a time. So we can get ourselves into a lot of trouble real quick with multiple, or say 200-300 NVX devices on a network. What the Director allows us to do is it creates a single 2-digit IP ID. It'll give each of the endpoints a 4-digit IP ID, allowing us to now, or I say 4-character IP ID, allowing us to now be able to connect hundreds of NVX endpoints to a single control processor through a single IP ID on its Ethernet bus. It will support multiple subnets, so we can have first floors on one subnet, second floors on another subnet. It'll also let us break the NVX devices or endpoints down into what we call domains. This isn't the proper term for it, but for my simple mind to be able to wrap around it, I will typically think of those domains as rooms. So I have room 1 that has 5 endpoints for encoders and 2 endpoints for decoders. I'll take those 7 devices and break those down into a single domain to make it easier to manage and work with. So NVX or XIO Director lets us do that. It's more of a tool for deploying large-scale NVX systems is what it's for. It does not pass video through it, so we can't take room 1 in my instance before with the 7 endpoints, and room 2, say room 2's got another 7 endpoints. I cannot take and pass video through the NVX Director from the subnet for room 1 to the subnet for room 2. It does allow control to go through there from a single processor. It'll connect to the subnets that are on it, but it does not pass the video through it. Yeah, I think that answers the question, doesn't it, Rich?
Yeah, I mean, basically, again, it's the NVX Director and is meant to configure the devices. It does not create the subnets, does not create separate subnets. It does not pass the control signals through it to enable RS-232 through the NVX, because that's talking directly to the control processor. It is a management tool for video routing. It's a great way to handle large-scale deployments of video routing and the configuration of the NVX devices. So it's, you know, understand the need and where the NVX plays into your market, right? And what you want to do with it. You know, the question is, can you do XIO Director, NVX Director to do auto discovery security audits across the subnets?
That's
right?
It's not what Director's for.
Not what it's for. Correct.
Yeah.
Now, the other question that came up earlier about controlling subnets with our security audit tool, how do I traverse going across multiple subnets? Or do I have to be on this particular subnet to make the security audit tool successful?
I'm going to let Rainer answer that.
I'm going to leave that to Rainer. I go to my
Yes,
expert
sir.
on security tool.
I do not understand exactly the question. So he wants.
So he wants to be able to use the security audit tool in an
Yes.
environment where he has to cross multiple subnets. Can he do that? Or does he have to connect to each subnet to be able to run auto discovery in those environments?
Yeah, the last one, because we want to check all the ports, so we have to be in the subnet. Otherwise, it makes no sense. You understand?
Yeah.
Because if they are blocked, we think it's secure, but our control system had the port open. So I hope that makes sense.
It does. Thank you. Okay. All right. Why don't we go ahead and wrap it up here as the end of the session. I want to thank you again, Mark and Rainer, for the wonderful presentation. I'm going to end the recording here. If we can go to the last slide, Mark, that'd be great. We're going to wrap up the recording. We'll stick around for questions and answers just to hang out with the audience. Really appreciate you joining us. There are 2 more MTA sessions left, Thursday and Friday, and then that'll wrap up the MTA. Many of you, I'm sure, are wondering when certifications and exams are going to go out. The exams are going to go out June 22nd, okay, for non-metal MTAs, and metal MTA exam will go out in mid-July. So thank you again for joining us. Always a pleasure. Look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. And we'll hang out for some Q&As afterwards. Be well, gang.